If you want to use Debian 11 to run your applications, then this video is going to show you how you can do an initial Debian 11 setup. And I will be using Contabo. So you can think of this as a Debian 11 Contabo VPS setup. So I already have a Contabo server and I think it has Ubuntu 22. So I'm just going to reinstall Debian 11 on this server. In a moment, I'm going to show you how you can deploy your own server on the front end. Debian 11, that's the one I want. And these are what I used in the Ubuntu 22 setup. So I'm just going to use the same things. If you want to see the Ubuntu 22.04 server setup, you can look at that as well. So I can just send this to my email. So when you're setting up a password here, make sure it doesn't have any special characters. When you add any special characters on your passwords in Contabo, I noticed that at some point you're going to get a permission denied. Yeah, at some point you're going to get permission denied error when you try to SSH into your server. Try not to use special characters in your passwords. So this is probably not relevant to you, but I'm just doing it so that if you ever need to reset your server, you can do it this way. So I've already created the post we're going to use for this Debian setup. If you want to see the progress of the server you are resetting, you can always come here under OS reinstalls and that will show you the status of your server. So let's wait for Debian 11 to be set up. Meanwhile, the post we're going to use for the Debian 11 initial server setup is here. So you can just go to bizanosa.com/Ubuntu 22. We're going to use this post to set up our Debian 11 as well. What are we going to do in this Debian 11 setup? We're going to do all this one at a time until we get to the end. Now the next step is for you to deploy your Debian server. If you want to set up your Debian server and you want to support me at the same time, just go to bizanosa.com/Contabo. This is going to take you to Contabo VPS and you can deploy a Contabo VPS server. So let's say you want this. You can see Contabo provides very affordable VPSs. So select the monthly term. I'm just going to go briefly over this. I'm not going to go till the end because I already have a server. Normally you can find the VPSs under here. If you come here under Cloud VPS, you'll see there's VPS and there's VDS. VDSs are dedicated VPSs. Select your term length. 1 month is enough. So you'll pay month on month. If you choose for 12 months, you'll pay for the 12 months in advance. If you choose for 3 months, you'll pay for the 3 months in advance. So if you're certain that you want to use Contabo, then you can just choose the month, the 12 months plan. If you're certain you want to use Contabo, but just go with 1 month if you're not sure. Region, so depending on the region you choose, your server price will increase as well. So always keep an eye out for the monthly plan because if you add anything, the monthly plan is going to increase. You can choose the data center that you want to use. Storage type, you can get 200 GB, 200 GB SSD for free or 50 GB NVMe for free. So normally you just go with the 50 GB NVMe, or you can go, if you're certain whatever you're going to run is not that critical and doesn't need a lot of speed, you can go with the 200 GB SSD, or you can go with 400 GB SSD, and that will add another 250 on your monthly subscription. So go with 50 NVMe, or you can also go with the 100 GB NVMe. And then as for the operating systems, we want Debian. So just come here under OS and you can choose Debian 11. And then login, as I said, make sure you're using a strong password, but don't use any special characters because once it leaves this Contabo form, somehow there's some decoding that may be lost and you'll get a problem when you're trying to log in with that password. So just use numbers and letters only. Don't use any special characters. If you want to change your password, you can change it via SSH once you log in, and then you can use the special characters once you set it up via SSH. Then networking. Now this is a new feature. You can see you can now have private networking enabled. Maybe you want to use Kubernetes, then you can set up your VPS servers on Contabo and enable private networking, and then you add servers in the same network. So you can see this is a paid feature here. I'll just go back to no private networking, and then IP address. If you want an additional IP, it will be $4 a month. So you'll get 2 IPs, and your monthly price will be $10.99. Backup space. If you need additional backup space, you can choose that there. Server management. You want your server to be managed by Contabo. There is the price for that. Monitoring. If you want to add monitoring to your server, that is there as well. SSL, that is there as well. But SSL, you can always get it cheaper somewhere else. You can even use Let's Encrypt for free. So once you've chosen everything that you need for your server, you'll just click to go next. Let me just add this. You'll just click to go next, and here you can log in if you already have an account, or you can register your account. So if you're new to Contabo, you'll register your account, and then you may receive an email asking you for verification, and that will be something like a billing item, like your power bill, water bill, tax return, even a bank statement, as long as it's got your details, the name that you put there, and the address that you put there. So make sure that you enter the correct details that can be verified, because if they need the verification from you, you can send a power bill or any document that has your name, your address on it, and then they will create your account. Once they create your account, you can log into your Contabo dashboard. They will send you the IP address, to your email address, and you're also going to get I don't know whether they'll send the password to you, but since you set the password in the last step, make sure that you can remember the password. Once your account is ready, you can log into your Contabo dashboard. Just go to my.contabo.com. If you go to my.contabo.com, if you're not already logged in, you will be redirected to the login page where you can log in, and then you'll end up on your Contabo dashboard. You can find your VPSs under VPS control. If you chose a VDS, you'll find that there. If you use a dedicated server, you can find that there. I'm just going to go with VPS control. Let's check if our server is ready. OS reinstall. If you go back to OS reinstall, the status shows that my server is ready. It has been wiped and Debian 11 has been installed. So if I come back to VPS control, I can just show you a few things here. So when you get your server, if you forget your password, you can always reset your root password there. You can also enable VNC and log in via VNC. I have a video for how to log into Contabo via VNC. If you want to manage your server, you want to cancel it, you can always go into services and you'll see an option to cancel the server if you no longer need it. So let's go ahead and start setting up Debian 11. If you're on Windows, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go online and download Git. Search for Git and then download Git and install Git. For Windows, we're going to use Git Bash, so make sure you install this because we're not going to use Putty, we're going to use Git Bash. So download Git for Windows and then open up Git Bash. If you are on a Mac or you're on Linux, you can follow along with the terminal. And by the end, we should be done doing all these steps up to here. So we've deployed our server. Let's log in via SSH. Let's go ahead and log into our server, our Debian server. All the information you need to log in should have been sent to you in your email address, or if you don't have it, you can always reset your password right there. Your root user password, you can reset it there. The IP address, I already have this here. So these are the ones that I used in the Ubuntu 22.04 setup. I'm just going to use the same thing here. Copy. Copy. And let's open up Git Bash and we're going to log into our server. SSH into the server, and the user is root. And I'll do shift insert to paste in git bash. Then enter. Oh, yeah, I always forget this. So I already added this server, logged into it. So my local host, my non-hosts file knows this server with a different key. And since I've refreshed the server, I will need to delete it from my non-hosts file. I'll open it with Visual Studio Code. I will open SSH non-hosts file. And I just need to remove the IP and then save and close. Control L to clear the screen. Try one more time. Yes. Type yes to add it into the file where we've just deleted it. And then let us copy. So for you, the issue that happened is not going to happen. When you try to log in, what's going to happen is you're going to be asked to type yes. And just make sure you type it. Enter. So the password may have been wrong. Let's copy again. Copy. Paste. Enter. There we go. We're logged into the server. The next step, once we log in, we will update the server and then we're going to create a new user. You know, the root user is a common user in every Linux operating system. So change it to something else. And we're going to create a user called the new user. You can call your user something that you can remember. For me, I'm going to call mine this just for the sake of this example. First of all, as soon as you log into your VPS, make sure that you update your server. So since I'm root, I don't really need to use sudo. I'm just going to do apt update. So apt update is going to confirm if there are any updates, and then apt upgrade is going to actually upgrade those packages, and then -y simply tells the system to do it without asking me for any confirmation. There we go. The update is complete. I'll just do Control L to clear the screen again. And the next thing, let's create a user. So give the user any name that you prefer. And once we create the new user, we're going to disable the root user from logging in. And for the password, let me just use the same password. Copy, paste, enter, shift insert to paste, enter, enter, just to skip all these. All right, now let's add this user into the sudo as group. And when you add them to the sudo as group, we can use them to manage our server using the sudo command. Copy. I will just do that. Enter. If you used a different user there, make sure you change the user to the user that you've created. Enter. There we go. Our user has been created. If you do experience any error here where sudo is not recognized, just do apt install sudo, and that's going to fix your issue. All right, so now that we've added this user into the sudo as group, let's log in on a new git bash window with that new user. So I'll just open a new git bash window. And I will copy that, copy, and then I'll do SSH. Shift insert to paste, so your user and your IP. Enter, and then I will copy the password. Copy, paste, enter, and I'm logged in as the new user. the next thing, let's just see if I can do any sudo commands with the new user that you've created. So I'm just going to do sudo apt update. So you can see bash sudo command not found. This just means that this is a very minimal version of Debian, and therefore I will have to install sudo. So I'll go back to my root account and I can do apt install sudo. There we go. So once I do that, if I try to run anything here, it should work. Now let's just paste in the password. So when you use sudo for the first time, you're going to need, every time you use it for the first time, you're going to need your user's password. All right, so now we can use sudo. That's good. What's the next thing on our list after we create the user SSH key login setup? Okay, let us set up SSH authentication for the user that you've created. So now that I've confirmed that I can use sudo command, I can just close this screen. Even before I set up SSH, I want to disable the root user from logging into the server this early. So disable root user from logging in. You're going to open up etc SSD, the SSH configuration file, which is there, and we're going to disable the root user from logging in. And then once we set up SSH keys, we're going to disable password authentication as well. But for now, let us just go and install Vim. First of all, I want to use Vim. If you don't want to use Vim, you can always use Nano. So wherever I have any place where I have VI, you can replace it with the Nano. But I know on Debian 11, Vim doesn't come by default. What comes is VI, and I don't want to use VI. So I'm going to do sudo apt install Vim. Yes. There we go. Vim is now installed, so I can use Vim instead of using VI. As long as you have Vim installed, even if you put VI, it will always use Vim. So let's edit this file because I want to disable the root user from logging in. So where is the root user? Permit root login. We want to change this to no. So on Vim, I'll just press I to go into insert mode. And then I'll press escape to get out of insert mode. And then I'm going to do Shift ZZ to save and close. If you don't know how to use Vim, I have a Vim video and a Vim tutorial that will show you how to use Vim as a beginner. And as I said, if you don't use Vim, just use Nano. Where it says Vim, you can use Nano. And we're going to use Nano in a few things so that you can see that you can use whichever one you prefer. Let's go back. I'll just close that and let's come back here. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to set up SSH Key Authentication so that we can log in using our SSH key instead of using our password. If you're on Windows, the first thing I need you to do is I need you to create a folder. Okay, so you're going to create a folder where you're going to store your keys. That's on Windows. If you're on a Mac or Linux, you can use that make directory, and you can just create a directory, give that directory any name that you prefer there. And this is where you're going to store your SSH keys. Now, the reason I usually do it this way is because maybe I have multiple servers that I need to manage with different keys, and therefore it allows me to store different keys in different folders. If you use any default method, your keys will be overwritten. If you generate new keys, they will be overwritten, and that's something you definitely don't want because you will lose access to your server. So the first thing, create a folder. Since you have Git Bash installed, you have this SSH folder here. Okay, so I already have this from the Ubuntu 22.04 tutorial that I did. So I'm just going to delete the keys there. Delete. And for you, come in here and create a folder for your keys, something that you'll know. Maybe you have a Debian 11 setup, you have Ubuntu 22.04 on a different VPS, then you can give them names that will remind you which keys are inside there. So I'm just going to come back into the post. We've already created the folder. The next step is to generate our keys. So SSH keygen is going to generate our keys, and then -t, let me copy it inside here, and then I'm going to explain it. So SSH keygen, this is going to generate our keys. This is done on the local computer, by the way. You need to open a new Git bash window on your local computer where you're not logged into your server. So SSH keygen, and then the type of the server is going to be an RSA key, and it's going to have 4096 bytes. So 4096 bits, I mean. And then the file name is going to be that. So the file name, it will be stored inside of this folder, and our SSH keys will have these names. So since this is, let me give it the name for Debian 11. Deb 11 server key. You can call it whatever you want. You can even remove that, not necessary. So I'll call mine Deb 11 key. And once we generate them, I'll show you that they've been generated with that name inside of the folder that we created. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to come in here on, make sure you're doing this where you're not logged into your server. I'm going to paste. And you can enter a passphrase. A passphrase is important because someone might get your key. If someone comes into your computer, copies your key on a flash drive, and they go to their computer, they will be able to log into your server with that key. So make sure you add a passphrase. But for me, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to press enter so that I don't have a passphrase. So our keys have been generated here. And if I go into the folder, you'll see that we have our key, the .pub key. This is our public key, and then this is a private key that we'll use to log into the server. So the next step is to copy that onto the server. Control L to clear the screen. And then the next step, let us copy the key onto our server. So SSH copy ID, the identity of the key that you want to copy will be there. And then, of course, we want to copy it for a certain user. So let's just do SSH copy ID -I, and then the rest we're going to fill. So SSH keygen, we generated our key. Now let's copy SSH copy ID, and then we're going to do the identity of our key, which is that. And note that we will be uploading the public key, not the private key. So make sure that you add .pub. .pub is a public key, and we want to upload this key for our user that we set up. Copy. So if you're on a Mac and SSH copy ID doesn't work, you can always install it using Homebrew. So let's come back to the local computer where we are not logged in, and then we're going to copy that onto our server. I'll just press enter, and then I'll come back here, and I will copy this because I need to enter the password when it asks for the password. So enter the password for this user, paste, enter. So the key has been added successfully. Now we can try and log into our server using SSH. So to log into your server, everything to log in is inside here. To log in is down here, but let me just talk about this because I know if you're on a Mac or you're on Windows, you may experience an issue whereby you're unable to copy the key onto your server. That is not the end of the world. You can do it manually. So if you go to your server, log into your server, and then you create this directory. Create the SSH directory, and then inside of that directory, you're going to open up this file. If it doesn't exist, Nano is going to create it, and then you're going to copy your public key and add it inside there. So let's just copy this, and on our server where we are logged in, I'll paste that, And you can see our key has been added here, and it should be in one line. So what's going to happen is, if you're unable to use SSH copy ID, you'll just come into this file, and then you'll copy this. You can open it with Visual Studio Code, and then you can just copy it. Copy, and then go back into your server. And if there is no key inside here, usually there won't be any key if this is a new server, you'll just copy the new key in there. So if you're on Git Bash, you'll just do Shift Insert to copy, and make sure it is in one line like this. If it is not in one line, make sure you've opened it with a code editor that will make sure it's in one line. You can also open it with Notepad, as long as Notepad doesn't have font word wrap. So that's something I just wanted to share with you. If you experience any problems, you can still do it manually. So on Nano, I'll just do Control X. And when you open it with Nano and you edit it, you'll do Control X, and then you press Y and enter, and that's going to save your key. And then once you save the key, change the permission for this folder and change the permission for this file. And then finally, for you to make sure that the next time you can actually log in using that key, make sure you change the ownership for everything inside of this home directory, so that it will belong to this group and it will belong to this user. Just replace this with the user that you created. All right, so let's log in using our SSH key. To log in using our SSH key is just the same as the way we were logging in. You'll use the IP address and the user there, and then you add the identity for our key. We're going to do SSH, and we want this guy to log in, and then we need the identity for our key. So we're going to log in using the private key. The private key doesn't have a .pub. So the identity of our key is that. All right, so let's log in with that. Copy, and then we're going to come here where we are not logged into the server. Control L, and then I will paste, enter, and there we go, we are logged in. Now you can see I'm automatically logged into the server because I did not set a passphrase. For you, I'm hoping that you did set a passphrase, and that is very important for security. Now the next thing that we need to do here, let's see what's the next thing that we need to do. So the next step is for us to disable password authentication, so that the only way to access our server is by using the keys. So password, we already did this. You've been following along, then you know that we already did this after creating our new user. So our root user is not able to log into our server, but we still need to do password authentication. So we're going to open up SSH config file again. Enter. Permit root login is already no. Now let's search for password authentication. Copy. I will come back here and just press escape to make sure that you're in command mode, and then I'm going to do / shift insert, and there we go. Password authentication is yes by default. So we need to change this. I'm going to press enter, and then I will press I to go into insert mode, and I want to change password authentication to no. So if you don't want to use VM, you can always use Nano. Nano is much easier to use, very straightforward. Password authentication, no. So I'll just do escape again, and then I'll do Shift ZZ to save this file. But before I do that, there are certain things you can also change inside of this file. If you're paranoid, you can change certain things here. Just figure out what each means, and then you can change the different things. Maybe you want the maximum authentication tries to be like 3. So I'll press I. make that 3 so that someone doesn't try to log in more than 3 times. And then you can disable that. And then max sessions. How many people do you want to be logged in concurrently? Maybe it's only you who manages the server. So you can maybe make it like 2, but this you need to check if there are any applications that uses SSH on your server. If there are other applications that use SSH, then you should probably increase the number. So I'm just going to do escape again, and then I'll do Shift ZZ to save. Save and exit out of Nano. Control L, and then let's come back here. The next thing, we need to reload SSH. Sudo service. Which service? SSH. What do you want to do with SSH? You want to restart it. Enter. And once you do that, now people will not be able to log in using a password, and we can do an example. Let's open a new Git bash window, and we're just going to copy this as it is. If you don't add a link for authorization key, you will not be logged in. And you can see permission denied, public key. This means that you need a public key to log in. So if you want to log in, you need to add an identity for your key. There we go, we are logged in. What is next here? After setting up SSH authentication, we need to set up the firewall. If you're going to install a control panel, you can just set up minimal firewall rules, and then your control panel is going to add more rules for your firewall. So I know on Debian, UFW is not installed. You can use your UFW to manage your IP tables. Instead of going into the IP tables to set up the rules, you can just use UFW. So I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to install UFW. Enter. And then the next thing, I need to enable UFW. Sudo UFW enable. Yes, continue. It is enabled. So if we do sudo UFW status, okay, so UFW is active, but we have not added any rules. So the next step is you can allow various things. So I'm not going to bother allowing SSH, because even before I log out of this server, I'm going to allow a different port, this port, and we're going to change our SSH port. So let me just allow this. We're going to change our SSH port at some point. So make sure you allow that. And if you do UFW status, you'll see we've allowed that port. And then by default, let's allow incoming. Let's deny incoming and outgoing. So I do have those together somewhere. I just want to use them. So I'm just going to allow this. Copy, deny incoming and outgoing. I'm just going to copy this. Default outgoing policy changed to allow. Default incoming policy changed to deny. When you install a control panel, it's going to add all the rules that it needs. But for now, that is well enough for our server. If you need to allow anything, you can always allow it. You've seen me allow a certain port. Maybe there's a port you want to use. You can allow that port. There's a service you want to allow. You can allow that. Maybe you want to allow HTTPS. You want to allow HTTPS. You can always just allow it. HTTPS. If you already have a website and you want them to be accessible, you'll need to allow HTTPS. That is if you're not using a control panel. However, most control panels will add the rules that you need. But most importantly, I've already added the rule that I need to change my SSH port. Now to change my SSH port, I will just need to add the port into my firewall. And you can see the ports are allowed from that to that. So use a port that is not being used by any other service. First of all, let's just open SSH configuration file. And for me, I want to change it to this port. And luckily, I've already added this in my firewall. So I won't really need to do anything after editing my SSH configuration file. So I'm just going to do Control L to clear the screen. Shift insert, enter, and we need to go here under port. we're going to change the port. So uncomment it and then change the port to 7059. And then I'll just do Control X, press Y, enter to accept the changes in Nano. And then the next step, of course, we need to reload SSH. Now the good thing is that I've already added this into my firewall. So make sure you add the port that you change your SSH to. Reload SSH. I'm going to do sudo service. Sudo service SSH restart. So now if we try to log in without, so we can wait and wait, but we won't be able to log in. And then I'm going to show you how you can add the port, how you can specify the port. So you can see it's trying and trying, and it's not going to work because the port has been disabled. If you want to log into your server, you will need to specify the port, and at the end of this line, just add -p, that is a small p, and then we're going to specify the port as 7059. Enter. There we go. Now, every time you need to log in, just make sure you save that somewhere. You can save it on a notepad so that you don't have to type it all the time. So for me, SSH, the new user, this is my login. Okay, make sure you save that somewhere. So every time you need to log in, you can always just copy it and paste it. Control L. Let me close this other one. What is the next step on our initial server setup process? The next step is creating a swap file. Now, a swap file is like a memory that will be used when you run out of actual memory. So if you have a VPS that has a small memory, small amount of RAM, then you need to create a swap file. We're just going to use this to set up our swap file. And I will not change anything. Just note that this is the name of the file, but you can always change it. You can always change that name, and when you change it there, make sure it reflects on anywhere where the name will be used. So this is the amount of space that we're allocating to this file as our swap file. So let's look at the rules that you can use to know how much GB you can add as your swap file. So let's just come up here. If your VPS has less than 2 GB of RAM, you can always use a multiplication of 2. You can use a multiplication of 2 for your swap file. So your swap file for a 2 GB VPS will be 4 GB. And then anything above 2, you can always use anything above 2, or you can start from 4. I would suggest you start from 4. So from 4, you can just use a similar amount of RAM. So up to around 8 GB. You just use a similar amount of swap file. So anything above that, maybe you can use half. So if you have like 10 GB, you can just use 5, so half. So in my case, I have, let me see how much memory. I think it's 8 GB. So I can just do free -h, and you can see my memory is that, and I don't have any swap file. So to confirm whether I have a swap file, I can do sudo swap on. And I need my password. Paste, enter. So when nothing comes out, it means that I don't have a swap file. So let's create a swap file. And since mine is 8 GB, I'm just going to create one for 4 GB. So I'm not following the rule because I'm not going to use this server for anything, but I'm going to create one for 4 GB. Paste. Enter. So we've created that file. The next step, let's change permissions for this file. so that we can give it root level permissions. Copy, paste, enter. As I said, you can change the name of this. You can even change the location of where it is. So the next step, we've given the permissions. Now we're going to turn the swap on. We're going to make it a swap file, and then we're going to turn on the swap feature for this file. So as soon as we do this and we do sudo swap on, it's going to show you that we have a swap file. So you're going to put that there and then enter. And you can see now, so setting up swap space, it has been set, and the size is 4 GB. So if we were to do sudo swap on, you'll see that we have a swap file for 4 GB. But if we restart the server, you'll see that the swap file does not persist. So for it to persist, we need to add it into the fstub. So we're going to do sudo vi, and we're going to edit this file, fstub, and we're going to add it just like that. Paste, enter.